What's going on, ProGuides family? My name is Dan, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be taking a look at all the settings that you need to use in order to rank up to high elo. These are the various settings that we've collected from our research of pros and high-level players, and we hope that you guys will enjoy. However, before we dive right into the video, you guys know what time it is. It's time for our question of the day. Today's question is, what setting or group of settings do you find you are constantly changing? For me, it has to be my mini-map. I keep trying to dial in the perfect minimap settings, but there always seems like a way I can slightly improve it, so I just end up spending 20 minutes messing around with the zoom and minimap size sliders. Be sure to leave your answer to the question of the day in the comments down below, and with that, let's get into the video. Starting things off today, we're going to be taking a look at the general settings. There are a lot of settings here, so we're not going to be looking at all of them, only the important ones. And speaking of important settings, make sure that you have Valorant set to a language you can understand, so you can play the game. This setting is located at the very top of the general settings. The first real group of settings that we are looking at are mouse settings. Obviously, settings like sensitivity are very personal settings, and we can't tell you what your perfect sensitivity is, but we can give you some tests to help check for yourself. Place your mouse on one edge of your mouse pad and move it to the other side. Doing this, you would be turning around 200 degrees in game if you prefer a lower sens, or a bit over one full turn if you play on higher sensitivities. If you can do multiple full spins in one mouse swipe, your sens is probably a bit too high. As for inverting your mouse movement, we here at ProGuides don't think that this is a good setting to turn on for most people, but if you're used to playing with inverted mouse settings, then go for it. Next, let's take a look at the minimap settings. Your minimap is one of the most important tools at your disposal and around. There are quite a few settings here, but the main ones to focus on are minimap zoom and keep player center. The other options matter too, but these are essential to figure out. Minimap zoom refers to how zoomed in or out your minimap will be. Personally, I like to see all of my minimap when I'm playing, so I used a bit zoomed out minimap, setting zoom to 0.9. For keep player centered, this is again another personal preference one, but is one that we do recommend spending some time with both options and see what you like more. It could be an important decision, as with keep player centered, it could be a bit more distracting on the top right of your screen or mess up your orientation. Now that we got those figured out, let's take a step back and look at some of the other minimap settings. Firstly, we have rotate versus fixed. This is talking about how your minimap will follow your mouse movements by either rotating to where you're looking or staying fixed in the top left. Personally, I like rotate as it helps keep me aware of where I am, but we recommend trying both and seeing which one works for you. Lastly, for the minimap, we have minimap size and minimap vision cones. Minimap size refers to how large the minimap itself is and how much screen real estate it eats up. Try messing around with this value until you find a size that you like. A lot of people seem to like slightly bigger than the default, so that might be a good starting point. For minimap vision cones, we recommend keeping these on. These will help you keep track of your teammates and the locations that they are watching. Actually, having this off can sometimes even hurt you, as you will watch angles your teammate is already watching, and no one wants that. For the final category of settings we're going to talk about in general, we have some of the other settings. There are still some interesting ones down here that you might want to have turned on though, so before you skip this part, hear me out. From the top, we're going to see some interesting options. If you're someone who likes to always see what weapon and if you have the spike equipped, you might want to turn on Always Show Inventory. If you're not a fan of bodies on the ground or blood, you can toggle these settings here as well. Show mature content, show corpses, and show blood are all options to consider turning on if not for your distaste of blood, then in interest of cleaning up the scene and leaving less visual clutter when you're trying to fight people. The explicit language filter is another to consider turning on. We all get that one guy who really loves to say mean things in all chat, and so by turning this on, you can help reduce that somewhat. For our next two settings, these are related to your internet and internet connection. The first one, instability indicator, we highly recommend leaving on. They help inform you as to what's going wrong with your connection and can act as a heads up that something might be wrong with your internet. Network buffering is a feature that you should keep on minimum if you have good, reliable internet, moderate if it dies or stutters sometimes, and maximum if you're using 2 tin cans and a string. Show bullet tracers is going to be the last setting we talk about for general, and is another setting you should definitely leave on. These will help you see where enemies are shooting from through smokes or in other situations. Having tracers off will only hurt you in the long run, so unless you have a specific reason to, they should probably stay enabled. Next up to take a run through are the controls settings. Since this part of the settings is mostly setting up keybinds, I'm going to be talking you guys through some of the settings that we can toggle or that aren't keybinds, as well as some of the settings that you might want to set keybinds for or explain how some things work. Starting things off, we will ignore most of the movement category, but there is one setting in here that is important to test, and it's at the very bottom. Yep, it's toggle for crouch, and this is genuinely something that you should figure out if you like or not. Personally, I like press and hold instead of toggle, but toggle might work better for some of you out there, so give it a shot. As we move into the equipment category, a lot of the things here are pretty self-explanatory. The main things we would recommend taking a look at and making sure that you like are the aim down sights to be hold or toggle, sniper rifle aim to be hold or toggle, operator zoom to be cycle or toggle, and auto re-enter scope to be on or off. These are all just those super personal settings that we talked about earlier, and while a lot of you will be fine just leaving these to their default values, it might be worth the time to tinker around and see what you can change with those settings. Moving right over to communication, the first thing that catches my eye is that if you can set up a party push-to-talk key and a team push-to-talk key. Sure, you can just have one or the other and set it up that way, but if you have a bind for both, then you will never have to worry about going into your settings to change things around once you need to talk in a party or to the team. It's not the most important setting in the world, but it could make you less frustrated. A setting that is definitely pretty important to get a bind for is your pings. Sometimes you just aren't going to want to talk, and that's okay. However, Valorant is still a team game, so being able to give rudimentary comms to your teammates, even in the form of pings, is useful information. So definitely have a keybind for your pings, but also consider setting a keybind for one of the actions under it, like ping caution or ping needs support. We recommend finding which ping you think you would use the most out of those ones and set a keybind for that. This way, you don't have to worry about dealing with a radial menu when you're trying to ping, and you will probably get a lot of use out of that keybind. The radio commands menu and commands wheel are both settings that are kind of redundant. Sure, it's nice to hear someone speak and it takes away from your team having to read your text messages or interpret your pings, but if you care that much about that match, you should probably just be using your mic instead. Radio commands are fun to mess around with, so no need to change their keybinds, but I don't think it's the main communication technique that you should be using. For our last category inside of controls, we're going to be taking a look at some interface settings. Firstly, and honestly a very neat setting, is the show teammates loadouts. This is a setting I would definitely recommend setting up since it's a simple key press and you get to see what your teammates have bought. It will allow you to more effectively plan around your economy and make better decisions in the long run with your team. This is also the place where you can change your armory keybind if you don't like it being on B. Unless you do a lot of observing, you can probably skip the bottom part, but if you do observe a lot, having a keybind set up for all outlines, friendly outlines, enemy outlines, and no outlines could be pretty useful in a tournament scenario. Alright guys, for our third category, we have the crosshair. For this category, we're going to be keeping it somewhat short, mainly because we already have a full-length video going over crosshair settings in depth. So if you're interested in learning more about your crosshair, be sure to check out our video on that in the link in the description as always. Obviously, one of the most important settings about your crosshair is its color, and in Valorant you have 8 colors to choose from. From color to outlines, these are another setting that you might want to enable. Outlines allow you to make out your crosshair from the background a bit more easily, so as to not lose where your crosshair is in the middle of a fight. When it comes to inner lines and outer lines, all you really need to know is that if you use the inner line setting, your crosshair will be a bit on the smaller side, whereas if you use the outer lines, your crosshair will be a bit on the bigger side. So it's up to you to go and test and see which one you prefer using, inner or outer lines. Or technically, you could use both if you wanted to. You can make some pretty insane crosshairs by combining inner and outer lines, but if you're looking to go pro, we would recommend sticking with a relatively simple crosshair. Movement and firing error are the last settings we'll be talking about for this section of the video, and these settings can be pretty useful. They will expand your crosshair depending on which one you have enabled or even both. When movement error is enabled, whenever you're moving, your crosshair will expand to show that you are inaccurate. If firing error is turned on, whenever you start spraying your gun, your crosshair will expand to show the level of inaccuracy in your spray. As we transition into our second to last category today, we just wanted to remind you guys that if you're looking for someone to help you get better at Valorant in a personal way, then be sure to check out ProGuides.com, where we offer some of the best one-on-one coaching from the best coaches in Valorant. No matter what you're trying to learn, our experienced and vetted coaches will help you reach the rank of your dreams in no time. Be sure to click the link in the description or visit ProGuides.com to learn more. In the general video settings, you don't really need to change much. Maybe adjust your frame rate limits if you have a slightly underpowered PC, but Valorant is not very demanding at all, so even that might not be necessary. When we go to graphics quality, this is where you get to run wild. Depending on how good your computer is, you can crank the graphics up as high as you want. Nothing in the video options is going to give you a real competitive edge, as it's just how pretty you want the game to look. Luckily, Riot knew that no one would enable motion blur, so it seems they didn't even bother to add it. That's one less video setting you have to worry about turning off. The only thing we would recommend doing is heading on over to the stats side and turning on your FPS counter. This will help you make sure that your game is running where you want it to and you aren't getting massive frame drops. Just like for video, there aren't going to be many settings that you can change in the audio settings for a competitive advantage or even any advantage. These are all just things you have to adjust to your computer. However, there's one thing we want to make sure you know about. Sometimes Valorant really likes to mess up your audio devices, which is why they added the loopback test under the voice chat category. This will allow you to hear yourself through your mic to see if the audio is reaching from your mic to the game. Use this whenever you think that your mic isn't working to diagnose if it's the game that is the problem or your microphone. Other than that, there isn't too much to say about the audio in this game. Make sure you set your input and output device to where you want them to be, and there you go. That's all you really need. Alright guys, unfortunately that is all we have for you today. If you liked the video, be sure to drop a like, and if you're feeling extra zesty, maybe even consider subscribing. We put out new videos like this one every single day, and the best way to stay notified is through ringing that notification bell. Remember to stay safe out there, and I'll see y'all again very soon.